Hey everyone. Today I got a chance to sit down and talk with Bolaji Oyejide, who is the VP of marketing over at TestBox. Bolaji has held many different demand generation roles over the years, and we really had a lot to talk about in this episode. We chatted about how branding is often defined as anything that can't be measured. We talk about why that's sort of a false narrative. We also talked about how his past experiences, demand gen at Bevy and other places, has really refined his vision on how to understand how to measure success, what those KPIs are, and obviously, how to communicate that up to leadership. We covered some things that are a little bit off topic, like how his passion for comic books has really led and helped to progress his career. So it was a super fun episode. Let's get into it. So, Balaji, it's great having you on the show.
Very excited to be here, Eric.
Yeah, so this is going to be fun. We were talking a little bit before the show just regarding, some of your background, and I thought maybe it'd be really useful for the audience just to hear a little bit about where you're coming from, and then sort of what brought you to TestBox.
Of course. Yeah, this is almost like the superhero origin story, if you will. So I should say, and this is relevant to the story, I very much grew up a comic book geek. This is way before it was cool. All right. We never thought we'd have Marvel movies. So that first Marvel movie, I was like, "Mama, we made it. We're cool now. We're gonna be accepted into normal
That's right.
society."
That's
But
right.
yeah, I'm gonna talk about my origin story, Eric. So I started out in computer science. My mom got an Apple IIe computer when I was 12 years old, and I probably broke the thing a number of times, but I ended up discovering a love for programming, really a love for creating something out of nothing. That was the thing that fascinated me. And I ended up getting a computer science degree. I grew up in Nigeria, but I came to the US for college. And first job out of school, I'm working for Procter and Gamble, building something called an e-business platform. The term e-commerce wasn't even out back then. We were calling it e-business, right? And that was my first taste at almost having an impact on the customer experience, the buyer's journey. But the fascinating thing about a tech kid working at Procter and Gamble, for those who may not know, I think I'm the only one who didn't know this. Procter and Gamble, Eric, invented soap operas. Did you know that?
No, I would assume it's for product placement, though. Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
100%. My
Makes
wife,
sense now that I think about it, but no, I never thought about that when they were running in the background during the day, you know?
exactly, exactly. These shows were invented to move products. So Procter and Gamble has always understood branding. They've always understood how to guide customers along the way, and almost how to do this like an entertainment form of marketing that a lot of us are just discovering in recent years. So coming up as a techie, there was this sort of backdrop of branding and understanding human psychology and the consumer. And I was like, you know what? I want to learn more about how that works. I want to learn how influence works. What makes people buy? So I ended up going back to school. I went to business school, got an MBA, worked for IBM. Eric, you and I were talking about IBM a little bit earlier. And it was cool because I remember being a young 20 something Eric, and I was working at the headquarters, the IBM software group up in Armonk, New York. And I'd walk up to the IBM building each day, and I'd stop at the front door and I'd look up and I'd be like, man, one day I'm going to run this place, right? Yeah, I actually said that. That was a real thing.
Did you do
Don't
that in
tell
your
too many
suit?
people. Of course, it's IBM, Eric. Yes. I had the blue suit. I had the white shirt, crisp, baby. Got it dry cleaned every weekend with the tie.
I
I
love
was
that.
ambitious. I was a go getter, but after a while, I started to realize that it's really difficult when you subscribe to somebody else's dream because you might get there, but you're not gonna like where you end up. And I realized that no, I probably don't want to run a, I don't know, 500,000 person multinational conglomerate. The job title is great, don't get me wrong, and the office is
Right.
amazing.
Right.
But you start to learn. So I started to work for smaller and smaller companies. Red Hat, right? Leader in open source.
Mhm.
Alfresco software, MetaData, right? You had the VP of MetaData, Jason Widup, on your show not too long ago. Phenomenal marketer. Really enjoyed working with Jason. And I think this is maybe something that a lot of folks listening probably can resonate with, right? There's a lot of great companies out there, like a lot of people want to work for. What is it? There's the acronym FANG, right? Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, right? A lot
Yeah.
of young folks want to work for those companies. But you start to discover as you go through the paces and as you start to tell your own story, you start to realize, okay, we're gonna go back to the origin story. Like I'm discovering some superpowers that I have, right? And these superpowers are going to manifest themselves in certain environments. In certain environments, I'm just gonna be like Superman, and in other environments, I'm gonna be Clark Kent. I'm just gonna be honest with you. And so I've had the opportunity to work at the largest of companies. The company I'm working at now, where I have the privilege of heading up marketing, TestBox, it's a 15-person company. And I've worked for everything in between. But I think self-awareness for marketers and for brands, Eric, is one of the most powerful things that you can have.
Yeah, I love the background in the story because it just really sort of brings to life, a lot of, what we're going to get into, right? Which is practical application of how to talk about brand and demand in a B2B world, which is one of my
Mm.
favorite topics. Everybody likes to use the words. It's funny, like I literally had a LinkedIn post like this where we were talking about, how everybody likes to talk, about it's cool to be talking about themselves as a media company these days or wanting to be a media
Uh-huh.
company.
Uh-huh.
And if you think about um sort of in my past life, one of the things that I did was literally worked for a media company. This is what we did. We did research.
Oh.
We did, I worked, it's for a company called Marketing Sherpa. And so that
Of
was my
course.
background. It was, yeah, yeah. And so we did events and we did, we did publications, we did benchmark guides, we did research reports, we did all of this stuff. And but first and foremost, the objective was really less about selling benchmark guides and conference tickets and more about getting, our brand and authority and reach,
Mm.
right? And
Mm.
really focusing on those things first, helping, and then everything else sort of takes care of itself. I know that sounds really
Mm.
insane to somebody who is on the other side of the fence where they're thinking, look, yeah, that's all nice and great and everything, Eric, but I've got actual numbers to hit, right? I have pipeline, I have revenue. That's what I'm always behind. Like these are always things that I'm struggling with. So I would love, I think this is what's going to be fun about this conversation is I would love to be able to talk about the connection, the practical
Mm.
connection between brand and
Mm.
demand and pipeline and revenue. And where do
Mhm.
those intersects happen? And like, how do we think about it? And more importantly, I think, how do we communicate it to the C suite? Right. And so this is
Mm.
important for both agencies as well as marketers
Mhm.
who are running a marketing department. And, obviously you're living and breathing this every day. So am I. So let's start with that. So
Yes.
coming out of director of demand, at Bevy and metadata and
Mhm.
these other places,
Mhm.
preparing you, I think, for what you're doing today. How
Mhm.
does like where and how does brand play in, right? So you took this new role,
Right.
at this 15-person startup, right? And like, what was your like first 100 days like? Because the
Mhm.
concept of where you're, I imagine, and I don't know because I don't know your story, but I imagine that was an interesting conversation when you came in and started talking to the CEO about your strategy and the direction that you wanted to take marketing.
Right. Right. Yeah, Eric, I'm so glad you asked this question because I think this is the elephant in the room. This is the unspoken question that looms over. It's almost like this. So I'm going to mispronounce this, but the sword of Damocles, I think it is. It's like this sword hanging over every marketing leader
Yep.
working in a corporate environment, working in B2B.
Yep.
You've got to figure out how to meet your short-term numbers while also investing in the things that are going to allow you to have medium term and long term viability. So let's see if we can unpack this really big topic in a number of different ways. The first thing I'd like to do is to tackle maybe some definitions. Can we talk about brand and demand? Can we talk about those two words?
Sure. Let's do it.
I want to unpack those. Okay, so when people say brand unfortunately has been saddled with a lot of baggage over the previous many decades. You've got some wonderful, wonderful advertising agencies like Ogilvy and company that almost redefined the advertising industry with the advent of radio many, many decades ago, and then the advent of television. They sort of were able to define, hey, this is what brand is. Brand is your colors, brand is your logo, brand is the pictures, right? Brand, this is how they were able to, it's all those things together. In modern day marketing, though, if you define brand that way, or if your C suite understands brand that way, you're probably dead on arrival. you're, you're probably dead on arrival because you are going to be limited to being the pretty picture department. And
Yep.
there is no way that you will ever be able to show an adequate return
Yep.
if that's how brand is defined in your mind or in the C-suite's mind. Let me use some terms as to how I like to think of brand a little bit differently. There's a term brand awareness that we all will tend to use at the beginning of a buyer's journey. Okay, we want to take them from awareness to interest to consideration and so on. But I think brand awareness does a disservice because what it does, it allows everybody around you to say, oh, you want awareness? That means impressions. That
Yep.
means when they see my logo, oh, that's SharpSpring.
Yep.
Oh, that's Bevy. Oh, that's TestBox. And oh, job done. Promotion,
Yep.
corner office, cigars, right? The impressions. That's why advertising media like display ads, for example, have been able to, or even banner ads, if you want to go like a decade before, have been able to get such a foothold. Awareness is not enough. We can go from awareness, Eric, to affinity. So not brand awareness. If I have brand affinity for Marketing Sherpa, you see what happened when you said I didn't read through your LinkedIn, Eric. I am a fan of the show. All right. So let me say I've been listening to the show, but I didn't go through your LinkedIn, so I didn't know your work history. When you said Marketing Sherpa, what happened? I had a reaction.
Yep.
All right. My eyes lit up. Why? Is it because you're a nice charismatic guy? Okay, yes, all right. We're not, but that's not the reason. That's not the reason. I actually was a consumer. I was on the email list for Marketing Sherpa. I used to read your emails. I used to read your guides back in the day. We're
Yep.
talking back, so I know Marketing Sherpa. That
Yep.
is brand affinity. When's the last time I saw an ad for Marketing Sherpa?
That's right.
I couldn't tell you what your logo looks like, Eric. I don't know what Marketing Sherpa's colors are. But I know that back when I worked at Red Hat in the early 2000s, there were several times when I was in a jam and I was like, I need to go to Marketing Sherpa and see if they got something for me. And you know what? Marketing Sherpa came through. So we're talking not just awareness, but affinity. So when we
Yep.
talk about brand, if you're struggling to justify brand, it might be because you're centering it around awareness instead of affinity. I just want to see what your reaction is to that, Eric.
Yeah, I love it because and I'll just tell a story that I was talking with, let's see. It was the head of content for a relatively decent sized, they were around 1,000 employees, something like that. And
Mm,
I remember we were sitting in this conference room and we were just talking after a bunch of meetings. And the thing that he asked me, he's like, hey, look, I'm running content. I'm having trouble getting budget. I'm always understaffed.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know our content
Mm-hmm.
is really top notch. I'm really trying to
Right.
get like I feel like we're doing a great job, but I can't get the respect within the organization for
Mm.
content. He's like, how do you do it?
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
remember it. I don't remember it coming off as snarky. Maybe it did, but my response was, is I don't talk about content in a vacuum because if I did, I
Wow.
would probably be laughed out of the room.
Hmm.
And I know that's brutal, but the reality is content is part of everything else holistically. And his problem
Right.
as he and I got to talking was he's just talking in his little vacuum, his little isolation, right? As opposed
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
holistically about how content informs every other stage of the
That's
funnel
good.
and why it's so important. And,
Right.
once we sort of made that shift, or he did, like once he sort of made that shift,
Mm-hmm.
um, everything started to change, right? The
Yeah.
dynamic, when he was talking to the CMO changed, and how he was perceived and the value he was providing, all of those things changed. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of overlap into what you just said, right? So brand marketers have the exact same problem. It's like people tend to define, even in demand gen, by the way, I'm going to call other people out too. They tend to have brand budget, right? You know what I'm going to say, right? Brand is always sort of defined as anything that you can't really actually measure,
Yes.
right? And that is
Right.
a
Right. Right. Right.
false narrative that I think we fall into, that we
Mm-hmm.
buy into as marketers, and
Yes.
I am on a mission to change that, right?
Yeah.
It has to be like there are leading indicators for everything that we do. Otherwise, you got
True.
to really ask yourself, why are you really actually doing it? And
Mm-hmm.
events and content and paid social, right? Like all of these things that are perceived as just only awareness is is has to be part of a larger discussion, a
Right.
larger narrative. um
Yeah.
and I think the third thing I would say is brand does not equal branding. Right, it's not the
Yes.
same thing, and people tend to use
Exactly.
those interchangeably.
Exactly.
Yeah, they
Yes.
tend to use those words interchangeably, and I think that gets us into trouble. So those are
Yeah.
my thoughts.
That's really good, Eric, and I can build on that for sure. You had asked the question initially about how marketers can sort of marry the two between brand and demand. So we're starting with definitions and pushing
Yep.
back on some of the boxes that we've been put into as marketers. So we're not going to accept the brand awareness box. I'm not going to
Mhm.
be the pretty picture department. And yet, I'm not going to let you take that word brand away from me. It's
That's
still
right.
important. It just doesn't mean what you think it means. Now, I want to
There's
flip
a
to the
meme
demand
there's
side
a
a little bit.
meme
And
that
I'm
comes to mind. The Princess Bride meme right now comes to mind, right? That word does not mean what you think it means. So,
exactly. I love that. No, that's exactly right. And actually it reminds me of it's almost like the telephone game, right? Where you say something on one end and then it travels through multiple people and then the person
yes.
at the far end hears something completely different. As
Mhm.
marketers, we those of us who love what we do as marketers are almost innately curious, right? To be a great marketer over an extended period of time, to be a great marketer in a short amount of time, you could just be lucky. You could be good
Yep.
at one area. Maybe you run the right campaign, you catch lightning in a bottle. But to do it over an extended period of time, you've got to be curious.
Yep.
You've got to have a hypothesis, have an informed hypothesis. This comes from experience, right? Or asking more sage people in the marketplace. I used Marketing Sherpa when I was younger. Start with an informed hypothesis and then test it in the marketplace, not in a vacuum, because any idea can survive in a vacuum. Put it out in the marketplace and then just observe, see what happens. And then, based on the data coming in, now start to make informed tweaks to your hypothesis,
Yep.
right? So, I want us to think about what are we trying to do when we'll even talk about advertising, right? The four-letter word in marketing, advertising for a little bit. We can't we can't have marketing without advertising. We do have to have a vehicle, a cadence by which we have a message, we have an audience, and we deliver that message to the audience. Okay. And then we get some data back from it. But in advertising, when the internet first came about, I talked about banner ads. Banner ads were all the rage, and that was like the cutting edge way for advertising. But over time, people started to develop ad blindness, and so the channels started to evolve and create more interesting and intricate and clever ways by which marketers could still advertise to their audiences. But it's almost like in the cybersecurity world where hackers will find some weakness, and then the guys who are defending, the white hat guys, they'll plug it up, and then in a few months the hackers have found another weakness. Like
Right.
every time we innovate and find a different way to advertise, over time it becomes saturated, people get used to it, and they develop ad blindness again. So for those, when companies bring you in as a marketer and they say they only want you to do demand marketing, they only want you to do performance marketing, run ads on as many channels, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, Quora, as many channels as you can. There is value in that, but it's very quickly diminishing returns. And even when you find the channel and the audience that works for your message, it's whoever's run performance marketing knows this. After a amount of time, it might be weeks, it might be a couple months, your results start to trickle downward. They start to go down. And then you've got to discover the next lightning in the bottle. So we're not arguing between brand and demand. It's not either or, it's not versus, it's both and. So
It's
I'll
both and.
illustrate that with, yeah, it's both and. I'll illustrate that point, Eric. Right now, I'm at TestBox. I'm about 90 days in, right? And I was brought in. TestBox is essentially, they're looking to redefine the software buying process from where it traditionally has been sales led to where they're shifting it to be customer led. They're putting the power in the hands of the customers. This is not a new thing in B2C, by the way. In B2C, a lot of buying experiences are completely centered around the buyer. That innovation hasn't reached B2B yet. And so, because we're almost looking to invent a new category, we're looking to disrupt something that's been around for decades, there's a lot of education that I need to do before people even
Yep.
know that, oh, that is something that I want. And yet, I'm in the same shoes as almost every other B2B marketer out here. I've got quotas, I've got a number to hit, right, by the end of the quarter, every quarter. And so, yes, do your education, get people to know the brand and like and trust the brand, but also, by the way, get those registrations in. And so I've been running different campaigns. I've run, Jason, my former colleague, talked about conversation ads on LinkedIn. I've been running the conversation ads. I'm running
That's the
ads
first
on
thing you launched,
Quora.
didn't it?
It was the first thing because that's a
Yep.
play that worked at my
Yep.
previous company. Right? I
Yep.
actually learned that at MetaData. So
Yep.
hat tip to MetaData for that one.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that's the thing. The fact that something works today
Yep.
doesn't mean it's going to work a year from now. Matter of fact, even if it does work a year from now, the efficacy is almost guaranteed to be
100%.
lower. So you
Yep.
almost need, yeah, you need like a foundation of relationship building, affinity generation. You want to get to the point where you're doing less convincing of people in the marketplace. Like, come on, Eric, come on, buy my product. I'm telling you, trust
Yep.
me.
Yep.
If any of those words are in your copy, we didn't
Right.
call me. We didn't talk, right?
Right.
But if you find yourself in that stance where you are trying to convince people, we need a paradigm shift. You want to be talking to the convinced. Now, it doesn't mean they're convinced to buy your product, Eric. It doesn't mean they're convinced like, oh, I want to be a SharpSpring customer. I want to be a Marketing Sherpa customer. They should be convinced about what you stand for. So if I tell you that at TestBox, we are standing against the traditional B2B software buying process. People are tired of sitting through demo after demo after demo, SDR call after SDR call after SDR call, where you're answering the same discovery questions, and then they finally show you the product, and it's a presentation and you don't actually get to touch and feel the product yourself and interact with it. The pricing
Mhm.
is obfuscated. They don't show you the pricing up front. Like where they do that at? You go buy anything else, the pricing is listed up front.
Yep.
That's something, without you knowing anything about TestBox, probably a lot of the folks that are listening right now are nodding up and down, saying, "Yeah,
Yep.
I'm so sick of the demos."
Yep.
So now there's some resonance between the problem I'm looking to solve and the problem you're experiencing. I still haven't told you how my product works or what it does. That's what I mean by I didn't have to convince you that what I have to say is interesting. I keyed in on, and this starts from almost being, I talked about being curious earlier. You almost want to be obsessed about your customer, their pain points,
Yep.
what keeps them up at night. You want to have that obsession about it. Don't leave it to the sales team. Don't leave it to customer success. As marketing, look at what Eric is doing now. You need to be talking to people in your marketplace so you can see the reaction when you talk about this versus that. So you can see viscerally, you can feel the pain points. Like if you look at my work trajectory, and I want to get your take on it after this. Over the past 3 companies I've worked for, I've sought to work at companies that were solving a problem that I am passionate about. So currently at TestBox, they're taking on the sales-led software buying process. I've been a software buyer for 2 decades. Sick of it. All right, I want it fixed like yesterday. Prior to that,
Mhm.
I worked at Bevy. Bevy is trying to make community a competitive advantage in the B2B world. I'm like, yes, please sign me up. I've been building community since one of the first things I did. I told you I was a programmer, right? Little nerdy kid programmer coming out of undergrad, right? I was
Mhm.
I was sort of missing my college buddies after I graduated from school. This was 1999. I built a social network one winter. This was before Facebook, Friendster, MySpace, right? So when we talk about community, like I'm deeply invested in it. And by the way, I've seen the reverberation of community even in the sales process today. So I think as marketers, if you can be really, really obsessed about the thing that your company is trying to solve, that comes through and it doesn't feel like you're trying to convince people to buy something that they might not even need.
Right. So I love that. I think, at the end of the day, like we do get stuck and we sort of pigeonhole ourselves into sort of all of these different little boxes as opposed to thinking, the way that the buyer buys, right? And,
Mm.
put yourself in the shoes, right? You said it earlier a
Mhm.
minute ago. You're like, hey, sign me up because you felt that pain. You totally understand it. And I think one of the we're victims of our own doing
It's
as B2B
true.
marketers,
It's
right?
true.
We're victims of our own doing. And it's like in so many different ways, like we've taken like the pages out of the enterprise playbook and that used
Mm.
to be like things that were very difficult. Like you had to have multiple sign-offs,
Good
contracts,
point.
all,
Yeah.
stakeholders that came across multiple, cross function and all of these other pieces that we somehow like because and this is like a major pet peeve of mine, but
Mhm.
we took the playbook pages out of the larger sales led motion and we tried to apply it to things that it never was applicable for, like
Mm.
lower ACV products where you just need to get in and get experience and
True.
understand like the thing that you potentially might, want to, that you think might solve your problem.
True.
And the reason why we do that is because as marketers, we like the cheat sheets, we like the shortcuts, we like the
Yes.
playbooks.
Human
And what we
nature.
do is we take and copy and paste, and then we never in the journey of that ask the fundamental question, why am I doing it this way? It's
Mhm.
just they and it's a lot of it's just human nature, right? Because we're measured on how fast we can get things rolled out and whatever the
Mhm.
next thing is and and that is something that just really I think we again we create these experiences, these very poor
Mm.
experiences that we, never would want as a buyer.
That's
And so,
that's true.
I love what I love what you're saying. So I mean, so this is interesting. This is a fun conversation because I think there's a lot of people that are listening right now, and they're sort of nodding their head along with you, saying, "Yeah, this is exactly what's happening. This is what's happening in my
Yeah.
company." And one of the challenges I think that marketers really face is because we don't really fundamentally understand the why, we don't peel back enough layers, we can't articulate it to non-marketing
Mm.
executives.
Mm,
And
mhm.
so what ends up happening is we just keep going with the status quo because we can't articulate clearly a
Right,
better way.
right,
And
right.
or another thesis for a something else that we should be testing or what have you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
We fail so easily and we end up just sort of rolling over. And so I think really hearing what you're saying, like I think a lot of marketers are sort of nodding their head along with that.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
curious, what for you, like, is that, just going back to the beginning of the conversation, when we think about
Mhm,
pipeline creation and
mhm.
deals, right? Because we know that still has to happen, and we
Yes.
know it's a balancing act. Uh, not a balancing act as in like we're out of control, but balancing act as in like budget allocation, making sure that we have the right KPIs that are in place, making sure that we're communicating that upwards to non-marketing executives, right?
Mhm.
To be able to set expectations and
Right,
sort of like help calibrate the team, especially if
right.
you're coming into a sales led, sort of organization. So
Yes.
when you sat down in the first meeting with with your CEO, okay, or your
Mhm.
CFO, right? How did you communicate your strategy and how it connects to pipeline and revenue?
Yeah, so this is not a trivial conversation. This is a really, really good question. There's not going to be one right answer. And the answer is going to vary based on the maturity of the company, right?
Mhm.
Is it bootstrap, series A, B, C, public company? It's going to depend on the industry. It's going to depend on, frankly, the mindset of the CEO and the C suite. There are going to be CEOs who are more progressive about marketing, and then there will be CEOs who prefer more of the status quo. It's
Yep.
very difficult. Listen, a lot of us maybe have kids, not everyone, but even if you don't have a kid, you might have a significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. It's not trivial to change someone's mind. It is not true. We're talking about not when someone could either take or leave, when they have a strongly held view about something.
Yep.
Going back to human psychology and how marketers need to be curious. Let's
Mhm.
almost have an out of body experience and step
Yep.
out of our bodies and watch us sitting with the CEO. You're sitting with the CEO who has strongly held views about what marketing's job is
Yep.
and what marketing should look like. If
Yep.
you think you're going to go into a meeting and help that CEO do a 180 degrees, I mean, I might have a Brooklyn Bridge to sell you. That's very, very difficult.
Mhm.
So I don't mean for that to be discouraging, but we need a little bit of a reality check. So you have to know what you're walking into. This
Yep.
conversation is better held during the interview process versus at the start of
100%.
your 90 days. But
Well,
having
okay,
said
so
that,
so let yeah, I was gonna say,
yes,
let's frame it that way. Let's say that you came into the job, they
yes,
knew what they were hiring, they knew what they were getting when they hired
right,
you. They
right.
wanted you to install this package, right?
Hmm.
And and then of course, you never get all the questions out in the interview process, but
Right,
there's
that's
a
true.
there's a level set conversation that happens like really early on that says like this is what we're going to do and this is how you should be able to get the readout that you need to be able to set the expectation. So how did that happen in your particular
Yeah,
instance?
excellent, Eric. So here's a few things that I like to do. I'm going to reference a book that I read many years ago coming out of business school. It's called the EMyth Revisited. I think there's an earlier edition just called the EMyth. It's by Michael
Right.
Gerber. It's over 20 years old. It's a worthwhile read.
Yep.
In that book, Michael Gerber talks about McDonald's, the McDonald's franchise, and how they've systemized everything in that business so much that a 16-year-old could do pretty much any job in the entire system. I think there is value. As marketers, we are creative people, and we want to protect that creativity, that willingness to experiment. But because we also need to create predictable results for the business, we need to have almost programmatic slots in which we're running those predictable plays. All right. So this is almost like just like the heartbeat of marketing. This is the lifeblood. I would focus on those first. So that might be driving leads to your demo offer. If your company offers a demo, if you're maybe a software company, you offer a demo offer. All right, that's one of the heartbeats. Every month, we're going to be running that play, come hell or high water. The only difference might be what channels. Are we going to add any new channels this month? And then within those channels, are we going to target a different audience? So there actually is a framework for experimentation. This is another thing that I learned at MetaData. So for any given marketing experiment, you could change the channel, you could change the audience, you could change the messaging, the copy, you could change the visuals, and you could change the offer. So a demo offer, that's just one offer. You might be offering a webinar, you might be offering an ebook. By the way, some of these offers will convert less well than others. I'm not a fan of the webinars or the ebooks anymore, but they killed for me 10 years ago, Eric. They killed. It's just that, just like with the banner ad blindness, some of these things, the efficacy tends to go down over time. Here are things that I would opt for instead of a webinar or an ebook. I would opt for experiences, experiential things. Maybe you are, instead of doing a webinar, try this. Like what Eric is doing now, this conversation, this could have been a webinar. And Eric could have spent a month sending out email blasts, trying to get people's email addresses, register for this event. And then maybe only 40% of the people actually show up live. And then he's chasing the other 60%. Did they attend or do they want to see the replay? And then he's sending all of the attendees to sales. And sales is like, 9 out of 10 of these people don't want to talk to me. Why are you sending these to me, Eric? Instead, Eric is taking that exact same content. He's giving it out for free. Now, you might think sales is not going to like that. What, Eric, what are you doing? Well, Eric just exposed, instead of maybe, let's say 400 people registering for the webinar, maybe 4,000 people will listen to the podcast, watch the short clip videos on social, read the blog post on the webpage, right? So you have a wider funnel. Now you've got to insert other experiences in the funnel that actually make people want to lean in. Like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Okay, check this out. Here's one play that I'm running right now, Eric. I think you're going to like this. There's a website called outgrow.co. And Outgrow allows you to build interactive quizzes, online calculators, surveys. It does like 9 or 10 things. Amazing. It's just one of these plug and play tools that every marketer should be using. So do you guys remember, have you ever taken any of these personality quizzes online? Yeah. You know, like if you're a Harry Potter fan or a Star Wars, they got personality quizzes for everything. What if you created a quiz like that for your brand? Now, I'm not talking about something that's selling, but something that's speaking to the core of the problem that your ICP, your ideal customer profile, is feeling. Yeah. So now they see that quiz, that you advertise it on Facebook or on LinkedIn. They're like, that's interesting. Let me see what they're talking about. Are you a this or are you a that? All right, what kind of marketer are you? All right, hey, we're doing this on the fly, Eric. What kind of marketer are you? Are you an MQL marketer? Are you a webinar marketer or a community marketer? I need to find out. You know, it's like, read my palm, Eric. Yep. So they fill that out for free. It's interesting, it's engaging, it's quick, right? Short attention spans. And then at the end of it, you have a little blurb that ties the experience they just went through to the further value you can provide if they're interested, right? Instead of putting the opt-in at the beginning, we're putting it at the end. So do you
Right.
get fewer opt-ins? Yes. Do you waste your sales team's time less? Also yes. Right? So
Yep.
that's just one idea. That's just one campaign you could try out. Then you're running the conversation ads. You're offering an
Mhm.
incentive for people to come maybe sit through your demo, right?
Yeah.
That may work less well on marketers because we've seen it for 2 years, but if you're
Yep.
targeting the healthcare industry or some other obscure industry, they might not have seen that play yet. Go try it out, test it, see what happens. So in my
Yep.
first 90 days, Eric, I would want to set up 5, 6, 7, 8 of these low risk experiments where the goal, I want to open up my funnel more broadly. So I'm not going to run a gated webinar. I'm going to run free content like this. Even better, if you add like a live audience, like a Q&A, do this on Zoom, right? And then the first time only 5 people might join, but if you do it,
Mhm.
see how I talked about programmatic? And if the
Yep.
5 people join in the first week, 7 in the second week, 9 in the third week, by the way, the ones who join will be highly engaged.
Yep.
6 months from now, you might have 50 people highly engaged joining. So you
Yep.
want to run 5 or 6 or 7 of these things, all low risk. So if they fail, all right, no sweat off my back. It was a test. And then as you start to contribute to your number, you start to, whether it's an MQL number, my preference is to move away from MQLs, but marketers probably don't have control over that. You're going to walk into a particular situation. So if you have an MQL quota, right, figure out which of these cadences you're going to run to contribute to that number. Once you start hitting that number on a consistent basis, now you earn the right, you earn the space to make some bigger bets. Now you earn the space to really start cooking with gas and really start saying, okay, what can I do that 6 months from now is going to start actually squeezing out the competition, is going to make me almost a market of one. I want to give you guys an anecdote. I know Eric hates it when guests do this. But I'm going to talk about SharpSpring for 45 seconds and we're going to hop off of it. The first time I heard about SharpSpring, I saw a Seth Godin ad on LinkedIn. Love Seth. Seth is
I
the GOAT.
remember those. Yeah.
All right. Seth is
Yeah.
the GOAT. I saw a Seth Godin ad on LinkedIn. What did I do? I consumed the content. Seth stuff is nuggets, is gold, right? I consumed it. I happened to notice, I didn't even remember the company that was doing it. It was like a light green, something or the other. All right, cool. Next week, I saw a Seth Godin, different one, Seth Godin video. Love Seth. I consumed the video. I took notes. I saw the same green border. Third week, this is getting boring, but it was the same brand
Right.
in my feed, adding value. Didn't know what they did. Something related to marketing, right? And so 6 months later, I see an actual ad from this company called SharpSpring. I was like, oh yeah, I know those guys. I checked it out, and I didn't even know, Eric, until like 2 weeks ago, that SharpSpring was related to Constant Contact. I didn't know. That's how well the SharpSpring brand has stood on its own, right? It didn't try to ride the Constant Contact. I used to use Constant Contact back in the day. It didn't try to ride those coattails. It became obsessed with its audience. It said, who does my audience care about? Seth Godin. All right, let's talk to Seth. Do we want to talk to Seth about marketing automation? Not specifically, just
Right.
about what marketers are going through in general. And so
100%.
I ended up having a lot of affinity for the SharpSpring brand. And so when they put an ad in front of me, I was like, yeah, I want to learn more. Let me see what you got.
Mhm.
You earn the right to do that type of stuff, but first you have to hit the singles week after week. Hit the singles, hit the singles. And
S-
in forums like this, we can exchange ideas of what those singles
Yeah.
could be.
So it's funny. You mentioned the Seth Godin ad. So, obviously Seth had a book like that made him famous called Permission Marketing. That is what this is. This is digital
Mm,
permission marketing, right? And it's in the channel in which you consume content. And in this particular case, it was paid social for you,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
Based on what you were just describing, because I imagine it was probably LinkedIn, your LinkedIn feed,
mhm.
and that's 100%. the way that we see so many of our people that come through our funnel say the same thing. They're like, "Oh yeah, I've seen you here,
Wow.
or I've seen you there." And how long ago, right? It could be weeks and weeks, it could be months and months. But over time, we sort of, you're working to build that up. And so in your case, you're doing that too, right? And you're setting that expectation with your CEO. You're sitting down with that person. You're saying, "Hey, look, we have goals that we have to hit." That's 100%. That's how you build your credibility, right? So you're hitting those goals. You are trying to continue to, like, what are the leading indicators so that you can get buy-in, right? On things like the things that they care about, the things that they know the best, the things that they know tie the closest, fewest hops to business outcomes, right?
Hmm.
Which is going to be deals and revenue. And so you're working on that, and you're constantly communicating, or probably over communicating, because I really feel like half of marketing leadership is really just communicating effectively
It
internally
is.
as much as
It
it is
is. It
customer
is.
facing. And then getting that right and setting expectations and doing all of those things so that you've sort of earned the right to experiment elsewhere in ways that, may be less comfortable or less familiar.
Yeah.
And still, again, tying those KPIs, like, everything's measurable. Even dark social and these other things, like, I totally understand, like, there isn't a direct line through site, or through to pipeline, for example, or an SQO. But ultimately, there are leading indicators that you are looking for that help to drive the outcome that you're looking for, which would be pipeline.
Hmm.
And creating those checkpoints and doing it so consistently over and over again, even if you're off target, like, even that's
Hmm.
valuable, right?
Hmm.
But,
It's
like,
data. Yeah.
consistently saying, this is what the strategy is, this is what we're testing, and this is why, and this is what the desired outcome is, and here's how we're doing over time. That creates that sort of cadence, of that rhythm that you need to be able to, to have success in that role that you're now in. So,
Yeah.
okay. So really quickly, couple of questions, because I like to ask this of everybody, because marketers tend to just really sort of eat this up. So first is, what is the tech stack that you guys use, within your company? And
Hmm.
then I have a second follow up to that.
Perfect. All right, cool. So I've had the right now at TestBox. It is a small company, Series A, 15 employees, and um, we almost have the luxury of not yet having a solidly defined baked in tech stack. A lot of
Okay.
times marketers will walk into a situation where they're adopting a tech stack. So I've worked with all the
They
marketing
inherit
automation
it.
platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah. I used Eloqua
Yeah.
back in the day. I used
Mhm.
Pardot. I used Marketo. I've used
Wow.
HubSpot. Um, Currently, we have HubSpot and Active Campaign.
Hmm.
Um, but I think for me, it's really important for marketers when trying to figure out what the right tech stack is to you want to right size your choices first and foremost. It's really easy to pick Salesforce as your CRM and whatever marketing automation platform you feel is the leader. I want the Cadillac. I want right, but a lot of times we buy way more technology than we need.
100%.
Now, if your company just has money flowing out the wazoo and it's not going to make a difference, by all means, go for it, even though that complexity is going to affect your day to day life. Now you need a full time admin and all that sort of
Yes.
stuff. So I'm a fan of right sizing the technology. When you're small, start out with just the right tech, and then you can grow as your needs grow.
Yep. Because not only whether you've inherited it or you yourself are making the choice and you're adopting it, at the end of the day, whenever you get it implemented, and you sort of get the reporting right, and you get everything sort of normalized and you use it, by that point it's probably getting to the point where where there's there's
Yes.
that age, is already starting to
Yes.
show, right? And that is
Yep.
just what
Yep.
happens. And so there's getting the blocking and tackling in place, and doing the basics, and right sizing for the size of the organization, for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then also, like, figuring out a way. to future proof to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
right? And one
Mm-hmm.
of the ways that I think you have to be thinking about as a marketing leader is, how does all of my data flow in, and then how easily is it for how easy is it for me to be able to understand and make decisions and action on the data that's flowing in? Because if it's just raw data that's not formatted in a way that is actually useful and that you can decision off of it, it's really just a bunch of numbers and a bunch of data that doesn't do you any good. And I see that all the time. Whether you could have some really sophisticated tool suite, or you could have an Excel spreadsheet, the same problem happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's, data overload, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
really understanding what is it trying to tell me, and what are the key drivers that I care about, and then how do I connect all the way through, right? And
That's it.
so, yeah, I just um anybody, I would counsel anybody, doesn't matter who you are as a marketer, just to be thinking about that ahead of time, because it's going
Mm-hmm.
to save you a lot of pain down the road.
Being
Yeah.
clear on your use cases is
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
critical. Eric's use cases are
Yeah.
different from mine, so therefore that
That's right.
might impact his what he chooses for his stack versus what I choose for mine.
That's
And
right.
if you know your use cases ahead of time, then you don't get
That's
into
right.
the analysis paralysis. You're like, I'm
That's right.
trying to answer these 5 questions, so don't confuse me with all this other data.
That's
I'm
right.
glad it's there. I just need these 5 questions answered.
Yeah. So, okay. This is the last question that I have, because I know we're up on time. And honestly, like, we could do a whole nother hour on this. We probably should, because there are a whole bunch of other questions I never got to be honest with you. But here's the last question. So you've dropped a lot of knowledge in this particular episode, which I've, like I told you at the beginning, the thing I really like about these episodes that I'm trying to get out of them for the audience is like, envision somebody listening to the episode and
Mm.
sort of like getting halfway through and being like, "Oh yeah, I want to do that." Right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to take that, and that's inspiration for me.
Mm-hmm.
Pause the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
take it back, write some notes down, and then just, press play and continue on through. I consider that a success
Mm.
for this podcast. If people will be doing that sort of thing. And I feel like, there's probably a couple of times in this episode where that was actually happening, right? Setting expectations when you came in, and things like that. What do you measure? KPIs. So I think, with that said, how do people who are listening to this episode get a hold of you, right? If they want to reach out to you and ask you a couple of questions, like, how would they do that?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I'm on there every day. That's sort of like a B2B marketer's playground. So definitely
Yeah.
come talk to me. I love talking about this stuff. I'm very, very passionate about it, because I think
I can't
both.
tell, by the
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah,
Totally.
yeah.
It
It
doesn't
doesn't
come
come through at
through.
all.
Yeah,
I'll
you
try to
need to
come
work
out.
on that.
I'll try to come
Yeah.
out of my shell next time. But I think buyers for in the B2B space in particular, our
Yeah.
buying experience has not matched up and kept pace with what we're enjoying on the B2C side. And I'm passionate about fixing that. If you've ever sat through a timeshare presentation before, you know what I'm talking about. It's something you don't. The end
I live
goal
in
is like, okay,
Florida,
it's
man. I live in
oh, there you
Florida. We're the
go, there
timeshare
you
capital of the
go.
world. Right.
I don't know why every time it's like my wife and I we go through it, it's horrible. Then a year later we've forgotten. We just want the goodies. We want the buffet at the end. Don't do it. And B2B buying doesn't have to be that way either. So hit me
Right.
up on LinkedIn. Let's geek out about how to fix this problem.
Love it. Hey, totally. I'm down. Like, let's do it again. Like, we need to get some, get a couple of other people in the room. We'll do like an AMA session with some folks that I'm sure are going to be having questions off the back of this. And we ought to just get a few folks in the room, and do this all over again. That'll be fun. So I'll
Sign me
reach out to
up.
you afterwards. Yeah. No, this will be fun. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. This was awesome.
Thanks a lot, Eric.